Welcome. This is the 17th annual CFA Society of Mississippi Forecast Dinner. My name is Thomas Arthur. I want to thank you all for coming out. I am the president of the CFA Society of Mississippi. Despite the relatively small size of our society, this is one of the larger forecast dinner events in the CFA Institute network. We can't go to a conference or a CFA event where other societies are present without having to answer question after question after question about the success of this event. And to be honest with you, the reason this event is successful is you people. So it absolutely could not be the success that it is without y'all coming out and continuing to come to this event year after year. So when I say thank you for coming to the event, I sincerely mean that. Due to feedback we've had from you guys in the past, we're trying a slightly different format this year. We've got a keynote speaker instead of our usual panel discussion. We have a great keynote. Dr. Daniel Crosby, he's a very gifted, highly entertaining speaker on the subject of behavioral finance. I honestly don't think we could have timed it any better. Dr. Crosby is innately qualified to come up here and tell you why we all as human beings are wired to want to sell everything to cash when the market does what it has done this week. He's also innately qualified to tell you why that's the wrong move. So I'm hopeful that myself and you guys will all pick up strategies, tips, tactics to, maybe control our little monkey brains to make better investment decisions, be more rational investors and less emotional investors. So I'm excited about his talk tonight. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I think you will. But we value your feedback. So if you like this new structure, let us know. If you don't, let us know. We try and take feedback from this event to make the next event better. So we want to hear from you. We want to know that you enjoy it. We want you guys to keep coming back and keep this event being as successful as it has been. At this point, I'd like to recognize the sponsors of this event. They've really stepped up to the plate to help make this possible. Our platinum sponsors: BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Southern Farm Bureau, T. Rowe Price, Vanguard, Raymond James. I'd like to thank our gold sponsor, New Perspectives. I'd like to thank our silver sponsors, Clearwater Analytics, Duncan Williams, Stiefel, FHM Financial, Principal, TCW, and I'd like to thank all of our bronze sponsors. Your sponsorship not only allows us to have this event, but it allows this event to be our primary source of revenue to fund our other initiatives, the awards, the scholarships, the university outreach, all the things that we do during the normal course of business during the year is made possible by your sponsorship of this event. A lot of people don't know that we were the first society in the CFA Institute network to offer a Woman in Finance scholarship. We offer numerous scholarships to help students and professionals offset the cost of getting the CFA designation. It allows us to fund the CFA Society of Mississippi Award. This is an award that's given to students that excel in finance that have a desire to pursue the CFA designation. And we work with any college in our area that wants to participate in this. At this point in time, I'd like to recognize the students that have been recognized for this award this year. And I ask that you hold your applause to the end. Students, when I call your name, please stand up. Oscar Algwin, Belhaven University. Chris Thomason, Mississippi College. Zach Ishii, Mississippi State. Peyton Chambers, Delta State. Matthew Harvey, Jackson State. Emily Rodriguez, University of Mississippi. Tyler Hayes, Millsaps. And Sachin Yadav from the University of Southern Mississippi. Congratulations, students, for your congratulations and thank you for your hard work and dedication to your finance studies, and we look forward to calling you colleagues at some point in the not too distant future. The success of this event allows us to sponsor and provide awards for teams for the CFA Institute Research Challenge. This weekend we've got teams from Millsaps and the University of Mississippi competing in Memphis in the regional competition. It allowed us to have our first ever CFA Institute Ethics Challenge during 2019. We had 5 different universities from across 2 states come to town to compete in this event. It's the largest ethics challenge in the U.S. to date. It was won by Mississippi College. I believe their students are here tonight, so please stand up to be recognized. Maury Welsing, Ray Hewlett, Chris Tomlinson. Congratulations again for winning our first ever CFA Ethics Challenge, and thank you again for your hard work. It also allows us to foster relationships with our university partners, to do university outreach, to get on campus, to mentor to the future of the finance profession. You know, we currently have 2 universities in the university affiliation program, Ole Miss and Bill Saps. We have a 3rd, Belhaven, in process of becoming a university affiliate. What this means is that these institutes are willing to partner with us, the CFA Society of Mississippi, and partner with the CFA Institute to incorporate a large portion of the CFA candidate body of knowledge into their finance curriculum. You know, so this gives students an exposure to, code of ethics, our standard of professional conduct, other things that might not necessarily be seen in a traditional finance curriculum. It's a discussion we'd love to have with any of the institutes that we aren't currently involved with. Gives us an opportunity to build bridges there, to do further university outreach, and to mentor students and guide that next generation of finance professionals. So administrators, educators, if you're in here and we haven't talked with you about this, you know, get up with me, get up with another member of the board, you know, at some point tonight, and let's start the ball rolling on having those discussions. Your sponsorship also allows us to partner with outstanding organizations like the Mississippi Council for Economic Education. You know, this is an organization that, you know, works to promote financial literacy with school-age kids, you know, basically elementary school, high school students. I don't think their mission, the importance of their mission, can be overstated in a state like Mississippi. So it's something that we're very proud to be a part of. They do this through programs, through contests, through educating the educators. And right now I have a brief video from Selena Schwartzfager. She's not able to be here tonight, but she's the president of the Mississippi Council for Economic Education. And also a short video from one of the winning teams of the stock market game, Mile Elementary from Tupelo, Mississippi. So I believe they're gonna play those videos right now.
Hi, I'm Selena Schwartzfager, and I am the president of the Mississippi Council on Economic Education. And thanks for inviting me to be here with you tonight. I would be here in person, except for the fact that I'm attending the National Association of Economic Educators Conference, where I'll be receiving a National Leadership Award. So please know that I wish that I was here with you tonight. I have been invited to talk to you a little bit about the Mississippi Council on Economic Education, who we are, why we exist, and what our mission is. And our mission is to increase the economic and financial literacy of Mississippi teachers and students through education. And one of the programs that we offer is called the Stock Market Game. And this program is appropriate for 4th through 12th grade students statewide. So we do offer it to all schools in the state, regardless of where they are or what type of school they are. And the purpose of this program is to teach students some basic financial literacy skills, but also to expose them to how our economy operates. So what happens is a teacher is first of all trained to understand how the stock market game works, and that is done at no cost to the teacher, the school, the district. And then they are able to implement the competition within their school, and teams of students will be created to learn about the stock market, to learn about basic financial literacy, things such as interest earned, compound interest, things of that nature. But then their task is to take 100,000 virtual dollars and invest it in stocks, bonds, and mutual funds to learn how investments can grow or lose value. That's an important lesson as well. And how to look forward and plan for the future. And so in a minute, you're going to hear from the winning team from the fall 2019 trading session. We're currently in the spring 2020 trading session, and it will run through the middle of April. But the way that our winners are selected, because what we know is that students, young people, and adults for that matter, respond well to competition, and so part of the learning process is to compete. And they're going to win by outperforming the Standard & Poor's 500 by the largest amount. So even our students that don't win, they are learning valuable lessons as it relates to financial literacy. Research has been done on the stock market game, which has proven that students who participate show an increase in math skills as well as personal finance. So the stock market game is a STEM program as it incorporates math and technology. So the CFA Society of Mississippi is a sponsor of this program, and we're thankful for that. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that we are always needing additional sponsors for this program. That's what allows us to offer it to teachers and students at no cost, which lowers their barriers to participation. So if you'd like to be part of this mission to increase financial literacy for students in Mississippi, please reach out to me. You can find my information online by Googling the Mississippi Council on Economic Education. So I hope you enjoy the next video, which will talk to you. Students will be talking to you from Milam Elementary School. They are sixth graders that won the middle school division for the state, but they also won, they were the highest performing team statewide, even against high school students. So I think you'll enjoy hearing from them. And I hope to hear from some of you soon about wanting to join in with this very important mission.
Hello, and welcome to Milam Elementary in Tupelo. I'd like to introduce you to my team, the Cash Kings and Queen. I'm Mac Wildman, and this is Carly Roberts.
And I'm Jakes Gordon.
And we'd like to tell you a little about the investments we made.
We're from this Caldwell's 6th grade challenge class, and we were given $100,000 to invest in stocks. Each stock we bought was paid for at least $20,000.
The first stock we invested in was Apple. We bought it at a price of $220 per share, and when the game was over, it was at a price of $265 per share. This was a 45% growth. The reason for this was the popularity of wearable products and services such as App Store, iCloud storage, and even their own credit card.
Next, we have Disney. Disney is a media and entertainment collection company. We bought Disney when it was a little over $136 per share, and when the game ended, it was at $147 per share. The growth was 8%. Disney Plus had more than 10 million signups in one day.
The next stock is Tesla. Tesla engages in the development of electric motor vehicles. We paid $244 per share, and the game ended at a little over $330 per share. Although some people might think that Tesla is overvalued, we had a growth of over 35%.
Another stock we invested in was Advanced Micro Devices, or AMD. We bought it at a price of $31 per share, and at the end of the game, it was at a price of $39 per share. This was a growth of 25% due to 7-nanometer chips, and they were able to steal shareholders from Intel.
Finally, we have Alphabet. Alphabet is mostly known for being the parent company of Google and does many different operations for companies.
We bought it for a little over $1,320 per share, and the game ended at $1,326 per share with a growth of 8%. Advertising is the most important business, bringing in the bulk of Alphabet's revenue. One thing I learned is that the research really pays off in the long run.
One thing that I learned is that it's always about taking a risk.
One thing I learned is that you never know what's going to happen with the stock market. One day our stocks were at about 34 place, and then the next day we were in second place for about a week, and then for the rest of the time we are in first place. Thank you for listening to our interview, and we hope you enjoy your dinner.
So anyway, I'm about ready for the main event. Y'all are about ready for the main event, I'm sure. But we got one more group of people I need to recognize before I turn this event over to the moderator, and that's the Forecast Dinner Committee. Forecast Dinner Committee, when I call your name, please stand up. Paula Nielsen, chairperson of the committee. Ryder Taft, Tony Edwards, Zach Farmer, Nancy Anderson, Davis Bourne. On behalf of everybody in this room, I want to thank you for your hard work, your dedication, your sacrifice in making this one of the premier finance events in the southeastern United States. It takes a lot of work, a lot of personal hours spent pulling this all together, and this group of people did a phenomenal job this year. So sincerely thank you. Big round of applause for these folks. So I'm going to now turn this event over to our moderator and master of ceremonies, Mr. Wilson Stribling. Anybody from the Jackson area, this guy doesn't really need an introduction. He's been a fixture of the local news since 1998. He can currently be found on WLBT from 5 to 7 in the mornings and on Fox 40 from 7 to 9. Thank you, Wilson.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm delighted to be here. When I came in and saw so many people, it was nice to see so many familiar faces. I have a lot of friends in the crowd, so it's good to see all of y'all tonight. We are going to get to the main event now, and as you listen to our speaker tonight, you'll notice that you've got some blank note cards in the center of your table. So as he talks, if a question pops in your head, write it down. And through the discussion tonight, there will be folks collecting those cards. And when he is finished speaking to you, he will answer your questions. But that's the way we're going to get the questions to him, is by way of those note cards. So please keep that in mind. And if something pops into your head, do indeed write it down. And we will ask Dr. Crosby your question, and he will answer it for you right here on the stage. Educated at Brigham Young and Emory Universities, Dr. Daniel Crosby is a psychologist and behavioral finance expert who helps organizations understand the interaction of mind and markets. Dr. Crosby's first book, Personal Benchmark: Integrating Behavioral Finance and Investment Management, was a New York Times bestseller. His second book, The Laws of Wealth, was named the best investment book of 2017 by the Axiom Business Book Awards and has been translated into 5 languages. His latest work, The Behavioral Investor, is a comprehensive look at the neurology, physiology, and psychology of sound financial decision-making. When he's not consulting around market psychology, Dr. Crosby enjoys exploring the American South, following the St. Louis Cardinals in baseball fanatically, and spending time with his wife and his 3 children. Would you please welcome Dr. Daniel Crosby?
Thank you, Wilson. Thank you, everyone. First of all, I need to apologize for tanking the stock market this week, but hopefully I have your attention now. I didn't want to talk to a disengaged crowd, so I had to drop the market 12%. It'll be back tomorrow. Once you've listened. So if we could switch to the slides now, please. This is only my second time in Mississippi. This is only my second time in Mississippi, despite the fact that I grew up in Alabama. And I know, War Eagle, as it turns out, But perhaps being from Mississippi, and I don't want to judge because I know there's a bitter rivalry between our 2 great states, but if you've experienced something like I have, when I was beginning this journey of mine, going all around the country and all around the world talking about market psychology, I would speak, people would come up to me afterwards to get a book signed or to say good job or bad job, as the case may be, and people would come up to me and go, well, where are you in from? Where do you hail from? And I would say Alabama, and the record would skip. Like everything would fall apart. And then they would say things like, wow, it was good of you to wear shoes, or like, wow, you have all your teeth. And I was always hurt by that, because I love where I'm from and I'm proud of where I'm from. And so even though I live in Atlanta now, I sold out and moved to the big city a few years ago. But even though I live in Atlanta now, I like to begin each of my, thank you. I like to begin my conversations by saying something nice about where I'm from and where you all are from, which is the American South. So we're going to start by saying something nice about the American South, which is something happened in Atlanta that has never been done before. And what we did in Atlanta is we cured, or eradicated rather, a disease for which there is no cure. Eradicated a disease for which there is no cure. Think about that for a minute. Now, the disease is guinea worms. And if you think I'm going to go into this in detail while you sit there and eat a Caesar salad, you are wrong. But it's nasty. And you can read about it in my book, but it's nasty. But all you need to know is that the CDC and the Carter Center, which is the philanthropic arm of the former president, they eradicated this disease. They took it from 3.5 million cases in the 80s to under 100 in the most recent census. And the way that they did this is not by a pill or a potion or a shot, but by teaching correct behaviors. Teaching people in these West African villages 2 correct behaviors. And doing 2 things right was the difference between massive widespread illness and prosperity and health. And so while we won't go into the specific mechanics of that, my journey tonight is to have a similar conversation with you. I'm going to try this bad boy. That one. Can you hear me now? Okay. You can't hear in the back? Okay, this mic's a little. So, wireless? Okay, now? In the back? Okay, thank you. So, the reason we're going to talk about psychology tonight, it may not be immediately apparent to you, well, maybe it's apparent this week, how much psychology there is to good investing, but I want to convey to you that psychology and behavioral control are the very, very essence of what it takes to create wealth. And it's what separates great investors from mediocre investors. And tonight, I'm going to teach you 4 types of primary risks, 4 types of ways that we tend to get it wrong, and 3 ways that we can start to get it right. And just like these guinea worm researchers, this is not hard. It's only 4 things and 3 things after all, but it can be difficult to implement. So I hope you'll go with me on this journey. The first thing we're going to talk about is the 4 ways that we get it wrong. Now, it will come as no surprise to any of you who have lived very long that researchers like myself, doctors of psychology like myself, have now discovered more than 200 different ways that you can screw up your financial life. There's over 200 different errors in thinking and biases that can lead you to make poor decisions with your money. But one of the things that I've done for my books is I've looked at those 200 ways and I've tried to distill them down into a more manageable universe. Because if you come to my office, if I'm your financial advisor, and you come to my office and they say, welcome, Mrs. Smith, here's a list of 200 ways that you could get this wrong, it's not very useful to you. But luckily for us, these 200 ways are underpinned by about 4 different things. So we're going to talk about the 4 biggest ways that we get sideways with money. And the first of these is ego. Now, we have a diverse crowd here tonight. A lot of these finance events are guy heavy, so I'm glad to see the ladies representing tonight. Would the women in the audience turn to the man closest to them and look disapprovingly at them now, please? Okay, hold that pose. Hold that pose. Hold that pose while I relate. No, you guys like that too much. That was too easy. So hold that disapproving glance where I share the following statistic with you, okay? Research I cited in my book, The Laws of Wealth. 700 men were surveyed, okay? 700 men. 100% of the men surveyed said that they were friendlier than average, okay? 95% of the men surveyed thought that they were funnier than average. And 94% of the men surveyed thought they were more handsome than average. Okay? Look, I may have gone to Alabama public schools, but that's not how averages work, okay? That is not how averages work. So what's the lesson that we learn here? The male of the species is worse at this than females. Females tend to, on average, be less overconfident than men, but women are very overconfident too, usually hovering around the 70s and not the 90s like guys. But when we are overconfident, we think that the rules don't apply to us. We think that the rules like staying the course, being patient, getting rich slowly, diversifying, we think that these rules don't apply to us because we think we are luckier and better and more skilled than average. And I have to tell you that one of the most powerful things that you can do as an investor is to think of yourself as completely and utterly average and assume that every bad thing that happens to people will happen to you and that you are no smarter or more gifted or luckier than the next person. Now, I stepped into one here, okay? I stepped into one here because most of my presentations are in the godless Northeast. And I did not know we were going to have an opening prayer. I did not know that every single person in this room was going to know the answer to this question. So only raise your hand if you have no idea. And okay, there's a few sinners amongst us. Okay, good. Raise your hand if you have no idea how many books there are in the Old and New Testament. Ma'am in the black, you seem especially confused. Okay, how many? Take a guess. Take a guess how many there are combined. 21. Okay, so she says 21. She says 21. Wow, your church-going neighbors are like, she was way off. Okay. Okay, ma'am, what's your name? Ma'am, what's your name? Holly. Holly, there's a follow-up question. There's a follow-up question for Holly. Holly, name a range. 21's your guess. Name a range that you are sure encompasses the right answer. What's the low and the high that you're sure encompasses the right answer? Hey, friends, leave her alone. Holly, what's your answer? We don't have all day. 7 to 7, a range. Holly says 36 to 52, somehow missing her original guess of 21 for reasons that are not super clear to me. So she says 36 to 52. Okay, so wait, what is the rational answer to this question? What is the rational answer to this question? Because when I did this with 100 people, and the average answer was 25, so you're in good company. The average answer was 25, and when I asked for a range, people said 20 to 30. Sir, what's the rational answer? Okay, no, we're not going there. Okay. We're not going there. What's the rational answer? The rational answer is 1 to a billion, right? When I ask you for what the range is, the rational answer is 1 to a billion, and yet all of us are prone to something which is called overspecificity, which is we think we can guess things closer than we can, okay? Every single one of the esteemed financial institutions you see at the tables today, love you all, thank you for your sponsorship. Every single one of them made a guess at where the S&P 500 would be at the end of this year. Every single one of them is now revising their guess, right? Every single one of them is revising their guess because the only truth about financial markets is that we just don't know what's going to come next, and we can't fall prey to this over-specificity bias. So how do we protect against this tendency to be overconfident? Well, the first thing we can do is diversify. You know, the first thing that we can do is diversify. We need to own all different sorts of asset classes. I had a friend call me today and say, finally, my bonds are doing something for me. You know, finally, my bonds are doing something for me this week. And I said, no, your bonds have been doing something all along. You just didn't realize it until today. You know, it's a good idea to wear a seatbelt even if you never get in a crash, right? The seatbelt still makes sense even if you never get in a crash. There's some other things that we can do, though. We can look at base rates. Okay, base rates is the likelihood that something's going to happen. Do you know what the likelihood of a correction is? Do you know what the likelihood of a correction is? A correction is a 10% or more dip in the stock market. Do you know what percentage of the time we've had a correction over the last 35 years? 100% of the time. Every single year for the last 35 years, the market has dipped double digits. The average dip has been 14% peak to trough. And so understanding base rates, understanding probability lets you look at the events of the last couple of days and go, okay, the market's down 12%. It's still up 36% over the last 3 years. It's still up double digits over the last 1 year. This isn't the aberration that it may feel like. So understanding base rates is a powerful thing. And the other thing that we can do is we can conduct what's called a pre-mortem. Now, we all know what a post-mortem is. Something goes wrong. Something goes wrong, and we look and we go, oh no, it all fell apart. What can we do next time to make sure that it doesn't all fall apart again? But what you can do with your financial life is you can actually conduct a pre-mortem. You can look at your financial life, you and your advisor, or you as an advisor with your clients, you can look at that and say, if it so happens that I don't reach my financial goals, what's the reason? If the day comes that I don't reach my financial goals, what will be that single point of failure? And let me daydream this bad event in advance so I can protect against it. Lots of things we can do. Okay, so the second thing that we're prone to is excessive conservatism. This isn't in the political sense. This is in the sense that we are status quo prone and we tend to be a little bit scared and risk averse. We tend to prefer the things that we've already known. Now, like any true Atlantan, I am a massive Diet Coke drinker and was deeply offended when I was offered Pepsi this afternoon at the Westin. They asked me if it was okay. I assured them it was not okay, and I would just drink water instead. But any of you who went to B school probably studied, whoops, did I do something? Was that you or me? Okay, cool. Any of you who went to B school probably studied New Coke, right? You studied the New Coke rollout. Coke rolls out this new flavor. It's new and improved. It was preferred 3-1. In blind taste tests, people preferred New Coke to regular Coke 3-1. But when they rolled it out to the public, there were literally riots outside of Coke headquarters, okay? Coke gives the people a more delicious combination of flavors, and the people riot because we can't have nice things because we're so stuck on what we know, right? So what's the danger here? When we look at investment decision making, people tend to own too much of what they know. Those who work in finance tend to be overweight financial stocks. Those who live in the Midwest tend to be overweight agriculture. Those who live in the US tend to be overweight US stocks. So investing is one way that we can see the world, that we can explore the world, and we can begin to break this status quo bias that we have. We also see this in fine art, right? We're looking at the Mona Lisa. It's the Mona Lisa is the most visited, most reproduced, most parodied piece of art in the world. And most people think it's because it's the best piece of art in the world. But did you know that for a very, very long time, the Mona Lisa was abjectly ignored? For a long, long time, the Mona Lisa sat in a dusty corner of the Louvre, and no one cared about it. There weren't school kids lined up to see the Mona Lisa. It was not that important a piece of the collection. Until one day when the Mona Lisa got stolen, and then it got in the news. And for the next 3 years, every night on the news, people in France were talking about the Mona Lisa. Who had taken it? Who were the thieves? Where had it gone? It actually took them 3 days to notice that the Mona Lisa was missing. It was so overlooked and unloved a piece of art. So when they got it back, ever since then, it's been the famous, well-known Mona Lisa that we know today, but we don't love it because it's great. We think it's great because we know it. So you can't fall prey to this need for certainty or this very, very human tendency to buy what you know and only feel comfortable owning things that you know and you're familiar with. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. First of all, we're going to diversify within and across asset classes. We're going to own stocks and bonds and asset classes from all over the world. We're going to take pains that if we work in a specific industry, if anything, we want less exposure to that, not more. We're not going to overinvest in our company's stock. If I had $1 for every person I know in Atlanta that has half of their wealth in Aflac or Coke or UPS, right? These are dangerous, dangerous things. And the other thing that we can do is we can sleep on it. When people are given a choice between two things, two equally desirable alternatives, if they're pressed for time, 82% of the time, they're going to stick with what they know. They're going to default to the status quo. But if they're given just one day to think about it, they're going to make a more reasonable judgment there. So times of great emotion are not great times to make big portfolio changes. Are you hearing me? Right? The times of great excitement are not times to make big portfolio changes because it tends to make us very, very conservative. So the next thing that we don't want to talk about is attention. So this is the human tendency to focus on things that are easy to recall instead of things that are likely. So let me give you an example, right? In the last year, 50 times more people died taking selfies than died from shark attacks, okay? And yet, if one person gets bit by a shark, it's going to be on the cover of Time magazine, and it's going to be the summer of the shark, because it is easier to imagine, it's easier for us to imagine a shark attack than it is for us to think about sort of drunkenly stumbling in front of a car taking a selfie, which is why many amusement parks have now banned taking selfies. So this is this human tendency to confuse what's easy to remember with what is likely. Now, one thing that none of us will ever forget is where we were on 9/11. And every year we rightly remember and we rightly honor the lives that were lost on 9/11. 3,000 people lost their lives that day, but there is a second tragedy that goes unheralded because of this human tendency to misweight probabilities. An extra 1,600 Americans died in the 3 months after 9/11 in that year because they were scared to fly. During that time, air travel, if you were around, if you were doing business travel during 9/11, you remember how tenuous it was, how uncertain it was, how scary it was to get back on a plane. And so many people during this time drove. American roadways were more clogged than ever. Planes were emptier than ever. And because of this, an extra 1,600 lives were lost because we remembered this singular, scary, easy to remember thing instead of looking at probabilities, right? Instead of looking at probabilities, which say getting in a car is much more dangerous than getting on a plane. This human tendency to misweight probabilities and to attend to dramatic things also causes us to overlook simple solutions. So I am from Huntsville, Alabama, which someone here that I met earlier today noted correctly is barely Alabama, right? Any of you have we're sort of proud of being barely Alabama in Huntsville, but Huntsville's a big space city, and a big proud space heritage. And so one of the stories that I was fascinated about growing up was the space shuttle. And I always watched all the space shuttle launches in elementary school. Every elementary school in Huntsville is named after a space expedition or an astronaut who lost their life in the pursuit of greatness. And so that was very much on my mind. And so one of the things that I remembered was that the very early shuttle missions had a white fuel tank. You know, this fuel tank that's orange here was white in the very earliest shuttle missions. And there's a really fascinating story, right? There's a really fascinating story about why this is the case. So NASA was trying to launch these shuttles, but they had a problem, and the problem was that it was too heavy. The shuttle was too heavy by 700 pounds. And so rocket scientists, faced with this challenge of needing to cut 700 pounds of weight, they did what rocket scientists do, which is they experiment with space-age polymers, they try and get the aerodynamics right, they try all kinds of new, complicated, esoteric interventions. None of it works. They can't get the shuttle off the ground, okay? And then a line worker, who I like to think was probably from Alabama or Mississippi, walks by, sees the rocket scientists hard at work, looks at them and goes, what's going on? And they go, well, we need to cut 700 pounds of weight. And he goes, well, stop painting the dang thing, okay? They look at the paint that goes on the tank, 700 pounds of paint on the tank. That was the difference. That was the difference. It wasn't complicated interventions. It was simplicity. Our investment lives, so often we look past the mark. We look past what really matters. The biggest thing is simplicity. Anyone know what the best predictor of investment performance is? Morningstar did a really fascinating study on ETFs and mutual funds and found that the best predictor of fund performance was fees. How expensive it is. Cheap is better, right? It's not how many PhDs the portfolio manager has. It's just cheap. Just save money up front. You're going to tend to do better. Don't let a complex dynamic system like the market trick you into thinking you need complex dynamic interventions in your portfolio. So how can we get over this tendency of ours to fall prone to attention? There's a couple of things we need to do. We are wired for what's called confirmation bias, which is we want to move through the world finding information that agrees with our pre-existing beliefs, right? So if you look at Democrats and Republicans when their non-preferred candidate is in power, right? So Republicans under Obama and now Democrats under Trump, if you ask them how the economy is doing, they answer based on how much they like or dislike the person in charge, okay? More money has been lost by people trying to invest their politics than almost anything else under the sun. Keep politics out of it. Keep your biases out of it. Look at the probabilities. Look at the base rates. Try and keep an open mind. And if you think you're onto something, if it's something you want to believe, you need to double and triple and quadruple check your work. You also need to look hard at the data, right? You need to look hard at the data because we're at a point now where there's 45,000 pieces of economic data released by the Fed every year. And it just takes a cursory knowledge of statistics to know that if you regress 45,000 different variables against each other, you're going to get some correlations that shouldn't be there. One of them that exists is there has historically been a 96% correlation between the production of butter in Bangladesh and moves in the S&P 500. So if I ask you to invest in my Bangladeshi butter production ETF after this, I hope I can have your trust and your money, right? You don't do that because it doesn't make sense. So we need data, but we also need it to be sound. So for the professionals among you, you need to help your clients understand the undergirding philosophy of an investment approach. And for the clients in the crowd, you need your professionals to help you understand why they have you allocated the way that they are. So the final way that we get in our own way is we get in our own way through emotion, right? So one of the primary things that we tend to do as human beings is to answer an easier question. So I want to tell you a little bit about how your brain is wired. Your brain accounts for about 2 to 3% of your body weight, but it accounts for about 25 to 30% of your caloric expenditure every day. So your brain is this tiny part of your body that is enormously hungry and wasteful. And so your body is always looking for ways to shut it down, okay? Your body is always looking for ways to think less. And there's a couple of ways that we do this. One of these is that we defer to the crowd, okay? You're watching a commercial. It says 9 out of 10 dentists choose Crest. You go, awesome, whatever, yes, right? Crest it is, because you don't want to have to think about toothpaste with all the other stuff you've got going on in your life. The other thing that we do is we rely on emotion. And so instead of answering a hard question, we rely on a simpler question, okay? Great example of this is boating, okay? People say, if I were to ask you after this, hey, you want to go boating? You would go, that's a little weird. We just met, but sure, I'll go on a boat, right? People love to go boating. Boating is super, super dangerous, right? Sorry to be a buzzkill. Boating is super dangerous, but people don't ask themselves, should I go boating? Is it safe? People answer the question instead, does boating sound fun? And it does, and so they go. But when it comes to long-term investing, when I say, hey, let's get you in the markets, people freak out all the time. I don't want to play the Wall Street casino. I don't want to invest in the capital markets. That's risky. Over long periods of time, there has never been a risky period in our nation's history to be an investor. Over the average investment lifetime of an investor, 20, 30 years, there has never been a bad time. It has always been safe. It has always been a great idea on a long enough time frame, and yet it's not very fun. And so people don't want to do it. So this is one of the things we do. We answer with emotion. So one of the things, with this being the case, one of the best things that we can do is rid our investment process of emotion to the extent possible. And I'm going to talk about some of the ways that we can do that in just a minute, because studies have shown that there are a couple of types of people who are great investors. Okay? One type of people that is a great investor is people who are brain damaged. Okay? Advisors can give lobotomies on the way out. So people who have damage to the emotional processing centers of their brain make extraordinary investors because they're mathematical whizzes. They don't think in emotion, they think in numbers, right? Another group of people that makes excellent decisions are people who are bilingual. People who are bilingual, who are asked to make a financial decision in their non-dominant language, are far, far better than those who make a decision in their dominant language. Why is that? Because if it's your non-dominant language, you stop, you pause, you think, you reflect, and it's more effortful. If you're excited about an investment, it is almost always a bad idea. Okay, one of the best things you can do, you should just make a rule with your clients or your professionals right now to say, if I call you excited, hang up. It's dumb, right? Think about what's exciting investing. Is Bitcoin exciting? It sure is. Is it advisable for most people? Probably not, right? Think about that the next time you're making a decision. Good investing is boring investing by and large. So what can we do? Well, first of all, we know that it's a little unavoidable, right? When scientists look at the way that money activates our brain, when they look at the excitatory power, they hook people up to an fMRI machine, a brain scan machine, and they show them pictures of good-looking folks, less excitatory than money. Show them pictures of like horrible things like sadness and death, less excitatory than money. Money gets you more riled up than anything else in your life, so it's unavoidable. We need to make a plan today to keep emotion out of our process. I'm going to talk about that some more in a minute. But another thing that we can do is that we can actually use it to our advantage. And we do this by naming our dollars or naming our accounts. So from 2007 to 2011, if we look at equity fund flows, which for the non-professionals among you is money that was coming in and out of stocks. From 07 to 11, people were pulling money out of stocks left and right, except for in one vehicle. And the one vehicle that people stayed the course on was college savings plans. Because even when you were scared about your retirement or your discretionary money or your personal portfolio and you were fleeing for safety, you still cared enough about your kid, and that money was earmarked for something you cared so much about that the yes of you loving your kid was bigger than the no of you being fearful about the markets. So this is one thing you should be doing. Professionals and retail investors alike, work together to name these accounts, to earmark them, and to ascribe a goal or a value to that money. Name that money and make it work for you. People are dramatically 2.5 times less likely to freak out and go to cash if their dollars are named. So I want to give you some more strategies though, right? This is our guinea worms talk. I want to give you 3 strategies for navigating these emotional markets and overcoming these four pitfalls that we tend to fall into. And they're consistency, which is just what you'd imagine, which is clarity, which is simplicity, and then courage, which I think we need on weeks like this. Whoops. So, why do I advocate for consistency? The reason I advocate for consistency is this. Studies I cite in my books show that the average person who is under financial stress, okay, so that's all of us this week, the average person under financial stress loses 13% of their IQ, okay? Let that sink in. Some of you more slowly than others, depending on how many points you started with, right? Not all of us, right? Again, I went to Alabama public schools. I don't have an extra 13% lying around. Like, I need all of my faculties. I need all those IQ points. So we have to understand that we are no different, than we are going to make bad decisions when the time comes, which is why I encourage everyone to automate their process, right? This is, if you had to do just one thing to avoid all of these behavioral pitfalls, automating a process is the best thing that you can do. Now, one of the reasons why this is the case is that people tend to dramatically overestimate their own willpower and underestimate how much a situation will influence them. And I know the pastor can back me up on this. People dramatically overestimate their own willpower. So I want to give you a couple of examples of this, okay? The first of these comes from a liquor store. This liquor store was having trouble titrating the flow of booze in and out of their store. They didn't know what to stock. And so they brought in someone like me, a behavioral psychologist, and they said, hey, can we play with the environment a little bit and try and shape buying behavior? So the psychologist comes in and says, okay, week 1, we're going to pipe French music in over the PA. We're going to see what happens. Week 2, we're going to play German music. We're going to see what happens, okay? Week 1, sales of champagne shoot up over 77%, okay? Week 2, German beer sales go up over 50%. Now, if you interview Joe Sixpack walking out of Billy Bob's liquor store with a case of German beer, right? And you ask Joe Sixpack, Joe, why did you buy this beer? Will Joe Sixpack say to you, I was subtly influenced by environmental cues? No. He will say, I don't know, it sounded good, right? Every day, there's so many forces impinging on our free will and our decision-making power. We're not always alert to them, and so often we are more subject to the whims of whatever's going on than we might like to be. One more example of this. Raise your hand if you drive an Audi. Okay, now keep it up. That's a cool car. It's a cool car. Okay, keep it up, please. My goodness. So humble. So you're proud. You're proud. Ma'am, what's your name? Are you married? You are married. How many years? 22 years. Congratulations, Nancy. So we're going to talk about Nancy and her kind now, Audi drivers. A recent study showed that Audi drivers were the most likely of the drivers of any other car to cheat on their spouse. Nancy. Nancy, I don't make the rules, Nancy. I just report the news. Okay, so in this study, there's no Porsche. There's no Porsche in the study. That was an easy number one if a Porsche was included. Okay. There's no supercars. There's no Lamborghini. What do we think is number two? What's number two? Audi's number one. What's number two? BMW's number two. What's number three? Mercedes is number three. Okay. Now this is serious. Why did no one say Hyundai? Okay. Why did no one say Kia? Right? Why did no one say Toyota? Because we understand deep in our soul that Hyundai drivers are not at risk, right? We understand that nobody's trying to sleep with a Hyundai driver, okay? Oh, and she's gone now. Nancy's out. I offended her. So there's a lesson here. There is a lesson. It's a fun study, but there is a lesson. If you ask people, someone needs help? Oh, is there a doctor?
All right, the gentleman has been taken care of. Appears that everything's going to be all right. I appreciate y'all for sticking with us. Thank you to our firefighters and paramedics, that our first responders that came to bail us out on this situation. And thank you all for sticking around. We're going to bring Dr. Crosby back up here in a couple of minutes whenever he's ready. And we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. So, he might hit the fast forward button and try and get y'all out of here. So, thanks, Doc.
Yep. Hey, now. Okay. So this, all right. Give everyone just a second to sit back down or make their escape. So I think it would be inappropriate if we didn't just take just a second. So the pastor in the invocation talked about one of the things that he invoked was helping us. I'm going to maybe misquote him here, but helping us to avoid fixation on money, right? Helping us to avoid the love of money. And I think the situation, and thank goodness the gentleman seems to be okay. I think the situation like that, we're here tonight talking about how to maximize wealth, how to be great investors, but I think a situation like that brings us all into very sharp relief and shows you just how unimportant some of these things are. So I think that it's a good, an unintentional object lesson on what matters and what doesn't. So I think it's something to reflect on as we continue our conversation right now. And of course, I am on the most risque part of the whole thing right now. I would be on that part. So the whole Audi thing, we had an intuition, right? We had an intuition that people who drive expensive cars were the most prone to marital infidelity. And so if you look at the predictors of marital infidelity, there's really three things, right? There's really three things that are highly predictive of marital infidelity. So look at your spouse, see how they stack up. So it's good looks, wealth, and frequent travel are sort of the three right. I'm two for three, as it turns out. 14 years happily married, make a great living, travel a lot, but so so good looks, wealth, and frequent travel. So basically, it's opportunity, right? People, if you ask someone like me who's been married for a decent amount of time, you say, why have you been true to your wife all these years? I would say, well, I'm a man of faith, I'm a good guy, I'm a person with ethics and morals, but like part of it's opportunity, right? So we need to put ourselves in good situations is the key. Far too often we rely on willpower. I have heard, if I had $1 for every person I have heard say, in 2009 I was scared, right? Like in March of 2009 I was scared, so I went to cash and I missed the rally for the next 10 years. But the next time there's a 2009, I'm going to be in there taking risk, buying stocks with both hands. Well, good news, now's your week, right? Like now's your week. But I tell you what, that person, I could say with a high degree of certainty, is not in there with both hands buying up stocks, because willpower or good intentions are a bad predictor of behavior. So what do we need to do instead, I keep going back to the preacher, right, to the pastor. We need to stand in holy places. We need to put ourselves in good positions. We don't need to tune into melodramatic news forecasts. We don't need to wallow in negativity. We need to automate our investment processes, go about our lives. Remember tonight that we need to, all this stuff, the way you've outsourced your financial life is because it's not that important. It's necessary but not sufficient to lead a good life, okay? So I want to talk about why I'm such a big fan of automation and just having a system, so you don't have to think about this. When we have choppy weeks like this, we don't have to say, what's the game plan now? Because you made the game plan in peacetime. When you look at expert level decision making, so someone like me with a PhD making expert level decisions discretionarily versus following simple rules, in a study of 200 different studies, we found that the rules beat or equal the expert 94% of the time. And rules work a lot cheaper than experts, okay? Rules work a lot cheaper than experts. So whether you're a financial professional or a client, work together to say, what are our rules? What is our game plan when we have weeks like this? So and set those rules in peacetime so we don't have to think about them. Clarity, okay? We're bringing it back to Bama again real quick. This is the Huntsville Times from when we first put, when Russia, I guess, first put a man in space, right? So this was what, 1969? What? 61? 69's the moon landing. My bad. 59? I gotta look at the thing now. Okay, now I'm embarrassed. So this is 61. Okay, so this is 61. 69's the moon landing. The year after the moon landing, though, something even more important happened. Something happened in 1970 that had a bigger impact on each of our lives than the moon landing. Anyone know what it was? Anyone know what it was? That's when we first put wheels on a suitcase. Okay? That's when we first put wheels on a suitcase. So I want you to think about this, okay? I want you to think about this. We put a person in space before we put wheels on a bag, okay? What's the lesson there? The lesson there is that we look past the mark too often, okay? So many people today who will not be outed have said, what do we do about coronavirus? Like, what's the answer to coronavirus? The answer is do what you've been doing, right? Like, do it. There's no, right? We can't over-engineer these things. I don't know what's gonna happen with coronavirus. I'm gonna be disciplined, long-term investor who's highly diversified, and I'm gonna try and maximize my income and keep throwing fuel on that fire. I don't have any answers for coronavirus. Nobody does. I have looked at all of the pandemics over the last 100 years. You know what they have in common? Nothing, right? I looked at what the market did after each of those pandemics. They have nothing in common. Sometimes the market got gutted. Sometimes it was up 50% 2 weeks later. Nobody knows, right? Don't try and look past the mark. Have a simple game plan and execute on it so we don't get fixated on sending a man to the moon. We look for those wheels on the suitcase because that's how you win, okay? We have a problem in America. We have a problem in America when 1% of our brothers and sisters are in jail. So this is a big problem right now we have in our country, that 1% of our population is in jail. We just recently crossed that threshold. But one of the biggest problems about having so many people incarcerated is that we have to make decisions about when to let them back out, right? We have to make decisions about who to keep and who to let go. And the way that we've done that historically is by convening panels of experts like me who went to too much college, and convening people to 5 PhDs to sit across from someone who's up for parole and saying, are you penitent? Are you reformed? Do you feel bad for what you did? Are you good? Do you promise never to do it again? And then I, with my shrink brain, try and look deep in their soul and figure out if they're gonna commit a crime again. Well, the stats on that are horrific, right? The stats on that are horrific, and for all our education and all our sophistication, we've improved judgments about prison recidivism almost 370% by firing all of the experts and looking at 2 factors, right? Looking at 2 factors. What are they in for, and how did they act in prison, right? Here's a little psychological nugget for you. Past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior, okay? Like, were you a jerk in prison? You're gonna be a jerk on the street, right? Like, I'm not letting you out. So this is true across our financial lives too. So many times we're looking for that hot dot or that complicated product or that next big idea or that perfect timing mechanism. And you can read every book in the world, and all you're ever gonna find is diversify, stay the course, be patient, try and focus on things that matter to you. So the last one, and I am hitting fast forward a little bit in service of time. The last one I want to talk about is courageousness. And I joked at the beginning about this being the perfect week to talk about this. I mean, this is a time for courage on all of our parts. This is a time for courage on all of our parts, which is doing the thing that feels wrong, but is actually right. And I want to share just a couple of studies with you on this. Now, we here in the Deep South love our soccer, am I right? Okay. No, actually in Atlanta, we have a pretty robust scene, and it's been pretty fun to watch soccer take over the ATL. But there was a great study done on EuroLeague goalies a couple of years ago. And they looked at goalies when there was a shot on goal, and they looked at their behavior. And they found that 94% of the time when there's a shot on goal, European goalies dive dramatically to the left or to the right. But they found that they stop the most shots on goal when they do what? Nothing. They stop the most shots on goal. The 6% of the time they get kind of stunned, because the shots on goal are about equal left, right, middle. And so that 6% of the time when they did nothing is the time when they had the most, the greatest efficacy. And the lesson there for all of us this week is powerful. And this is where, in my book, I talk about something called Wall Street Bizarro World. Because any other place in life, okay, any other place in life, if you want to get smarter, read more books. You want to get stronger, lift more weights. You want to make more money in the market, do nothing, okay? Do nothing. It's deeply, deeply counterintuitive, and that's why not many of us are very good investors. And yet, 19 different countries now that behavioral scientists like myself have looked at, and they found that in every country we've ever studied, the more active you are in your portfolio, the worse you do. And it's monotonic, it's stepwise, right? The more active you are, the worse you do. And in fact, this is one of the reasons that women outperform men very handily, both as individual investors and as portfolio managers at the professional level. Women just kick men's butts at managing money. And the reason that they do is that they tend to be more patient and less active. It's a powerful lesson for a week like this. But I want to drive it home. Hopefully, this all makes sense to you, the goalies and the study of the 19 countries. But there's no better study than this to remember on a week like this, which is Fidelity did a study. It's cited in Jim O'Shaughnessy's excellent book, What Works on Wall Street. So retail investors are sort of mom and pop investors, and Fidelity has this great volume of data, and they said, we're gonna look at our retail, our mom and pop investors, and we're gonna look at the cream of the crop, the 1% of these mom and pop investors, and we're gonna see what differentiates them from the rest of their peers and makes them these like 1% great investment geniuses. And the two most prevalent findings were this, okay? They dig into the data, they find two things. The best investors in this class were dead or had forgotten they had an account at Fidelity, okay? It gets no better, it gets no better than this. They call them up, again, searching to put a man on the moon. What's your due diligence process? How do you analyze stocks? Oh, Mima's dead, right? No, Mima's dead. That's why she's been killing it in her account, right? That's why. So the tricky thing is here, I just have two more slides. The tricky thing is here is bad stuff happens, right? Bad stuff has happened. It has always happened. And we don't know what the future will hold. Like every developed country in the world has had really, really super nasty drawdowns historically, and we're no exception to that. And we don't know what the future looks like, right? But we have to prepare, and one of the ways that we prepare is by working with a professional, okay? One of the ways we prepare is working with a professional. Studies show that people who work with a financial professional do 2 to 3% better per year, which may not sound like a huge number, but if you extrapolate that over an investment lifetime, people who have a long-term relationship with a financial professional have 2.7 times the wealth of their peers who have achieved no advice, who've not received any advice, rather. And the reason is not because their advisors or the folks they work with are great at picking stocks or always have them timing the market perfectly. That's not it at all. The reason is they have kept them from being their own worst enemy. Okay? They have kept them out of their own way. They have kept them from making a handful of stupid decisions at inopportune times, and they have kept them in their seats, right? Sorry? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So the last slide I want to share with you comes with a little bit of a story from my family. So my sister lives in Southern California for reasons that are unclear to me, and in $1 million tiny home. I don't get it. God bless Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi, right? So she lives in California, and her in-laws live in her basement. And the reason that her in-laws live in her basement, my sister has 4 kids. They're quite rowdy. I would not want to spend my retirement days there. So the reason her in-laws live in her basement is her father-in-law was a dentist. He did everything right. He went to school. He worked hard. He saved money. He had a $2.5 million home in California that was paid off, right? He had a $2.5 million home in California that was paid off. He had a $5 million nest egg, and he was unadvised. He was doing it himself through an E-Trade account or whatever. And so he gets approached by a friend who has a can't-miss investment deal. He sells his house, he liquidates his account, and puts $7.5 million in his friend's Las Vegas real estate deal in 2005. So this gentleman went from having and then began to have Parkinsonian tremors in his hands and could no longer do the work of a dentist. He's first forced into an early retirement, goes from being a 7 millionaire to a 50,000-aire, and now has to live with my rowdy nieces and nephews, right? So this is the power of advice. This is the power of advice. If you can keep someone out of their way for 2 or 3 times, if he had gotten one piece of good advice at the opportune moment, it would have saved him $7 million. So I want to close with a story. I'm a big baseball guy. Paul DePodesta, formerly of the Dodgers front office, tells a story about being out with a buddy of his, and they're out playing blackjack one night. And so the buddy has 18. He's showing 18, and he's a little drunk, and he wants to hit. And so, like DePodesta, the mathematical genius that he is like, oh, come on, man. Like, you cannot hit on 18. Like, I'm not going to let you do this to yourself. I'm not going to let you do this to yourself. And the buddy is insistent, hit me, hit me. The dealer hits him, it's a 3, okay? So the buddy stands up and he goes, I was right, I told you I was right. And DePodesta ends by saying, you can be right and still be a moron, okay? The reason the market is so tricky is you can do everything right, and a week like this still stings. A week like this can still sting like crazy, and you can be doing everything right. And then some people, no offense to the kids who won the stock competition, you can have a 5-stock portfolio and blow the roof off, right? Owning Tesla and Disney, right? You can get lucky. You can get lucky by doing the wrong thing, and you can get hurt by doing the right thing. But I can promise you that the people who do the right thing, the people who aren't morons, the people who manage their own hubris and their own ego and get out of their own way and stay on the straight and narrow for the long term, these people are successful in the end. So you might feel like a moron this week, but as long as you're doing the right thing, I can promise you that it works out over the long term. This has been, for many reasons, an unforgettable evening. Thank you very much for sticking around.
And as promised, we're going to get to some of your questions for Dr. Crosby. We'll try to do this quickly as well. You ready?
Ready.
You're ready for anything now, right?
Yeah. What could you throw at me now?
All right. Question number 1: what kind of car do you drive?
I drive a Mercedes, and I'm happily married. So what does that say about my looks? I know it's terrible.
So that actually wasn't one of the questions. That was moderator's privilege. Okay, for real now. What are the top few things that we can do to help our clients avoid some of the bad behaviors discussed here tonight?
So I'm going to get, I've talked about many of these things just here, but I'm going to give one that's a little bit off the wall. So whether you are in the business of providing financial advice, or you are a client looking for someone to give you financial advice, I think rapport is the biggest thing. So when you, in a former life, I was an honest-to-goodness shrink. That's what I went to school for, to have you lay on my chaise lounge and tell me about your mom. And so the best predictor of therapeutic outcomes is not how many years someone went to school. It's not their school of thought or the school of training or the type of intervention. It's how do you get along. And so on weeks like this, you need an advisor in your corner who you love. And so when you are vetting a financial professional, I think you should look for someone who you respect, someone who can be candid with you, shoot you straight, and someone who you care about enough to follow their advice when things are profoundly hard like they are this week.
What are some books you would suggest for those interested in behavioral finance? Would it be the few that I've seen floating around here tonight?
Slam dunk. Okay. So mine are excellent, of course, but there's one called Nudge. Which was written by Richard Thaler, who's a Nobel Prize winner. And it's about sort of behavioral economics broadly and how it applies to policy and advertising and life broadly. I think reading Nudge is an essential part of moving through the world, and just knowing how social media and advertisers and other people are trying to shape your behavior. I think it's an interesting read for people who are interested in this stuff broadly outside of markets.
What's one common misconception about behavioral finance?
I think I sort of touched on it on the end here. I think that one of the most common misconceptions about investing is that it takes a complicated process, a big IQ, a chalk stripe suit, or these sorts of things. Very, very consistently, mom and pop investors beat hedge fund managers, like, all the time. And you can't say that about anything else. Like, you don't wake up and watch a YouTube clip and become the world's greatest heart surgeon, or the world's greatest engineer. It's a very weird profession where a disciplined individual with the right kind of advisor can beat literal billionaires. And so I think we can take heart in this, that there's something to be said for simplicity. There's something to be said for people who put family and life ahead of making money, because I think when you put money in its proper place, like, good stuff comes. So it's a very, very strange discipline where a novice can beat a pro, and yet this is it. And with the right process and the right people around you, it's totally possible.
You touched on coronavirus a little bit a moment ago, but this question is more specific. Which strategies would you recommend to help me not freak out about my investments when things like coronavirus happen? Oh, excuse me.
So there's two answers. There's two answers that I would give here. So the first is to know your risk tolerance, right? The people's threshold for freaking out is very, very different. Some people freak out on the drop of a hat, and other people, it takes a lot to rattle them. And so working with a professional to understand where your threshold for freaking out is, and making sure you have an allocation that is appropriately titrated to your level of freak-outishness, scientific term, is very, very important. And then the second thing I would say is we engage in something called mental accounting, which is, I talked about it earlier, naming your dollars, right? We spend and invest and account for money differently depending on how we've labeled it. So one thing that my wife and I did recently is we paid off our house. And the reason that we did that is we had to stop freaking out. We said we know we need to remain invested throughout whatever comes with coronavirus and the election and whatever else is coming. But we said it would just take the edge off a little bit if we could kind of tick this box. And so I think there are ways that you can do that. You can tick a box. You can, maybe take a 5% allocation to safety. Or when markets are heady, have a 5% play account so you can not feel like you're missing out, right? So there are ways that you can do it at the margins. But I think it's important to know that, for the bulk of your real money, there's just no way to predict this. And I did put a good faith effort knowing that I would get coronavirus questions. I did put a good faith effort into looking into the historical patterns around pandemics, and there's just nothing that emerges. There's just nothing, there's no consistent pattern. And so I think simplicity remains sort of the buzzword.
Dr. Daniel Crosby, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
As you said, it's been an unforgettable evening in a lot of ways. Thank you, Dr. Crosby. Thank you all for being here, and be careful driving home.